Jin Kazama has been a fan favorite in the Tekken series since his inception in Tekken 3, and to most, he still is. But to a lot of the dedicated fanbase due to his Tekken 8 iteration, they have become fed up with this character. Harada and Bamco took a previously unique character and modernized him. And what modernized means in Tekken is take away any kind of individuality, creating a brain-dead monkey character. This is why Tekken 8 Jin is the lamest Tekken rework / redesign ever, and why he should have never been changed. But first, like, comment, subscribe. Comment Jin is for the fucking streets. And let's get into this. Jin Kazama has pretty much been the main character in Tekken since 1997. And for all of that time, he was a pretty inaccessible character. What I mean by that is, the level of difficulty required to play this character was very high. Jin has always been a well-rounded character, except you had to have good knowledge and execution to apply all of his moves correctly to get the most out of the character. Having an inaccessible MC up until I would say Tekken 7 was fine, because as a whole Tekken was an inaccessible game for a casual audience. It's why the game has always had a more niche and ridiculously dedicated fanbase. Basic requirements in previous Tekken games were hard, the most egregious example of this simply being backdashing. Normal backdashing in Tekken has always been horrible. It's incredibly slow and barely moves anywhere. However, Korean backdash allows you to backdash faster while still blocking, but this of course is a very challenging thing for a new player just to have and be second nature. How this comes back to my point is, Tekken as a whole was pretty inaccessible, therefore Jin being inaccessible for a new player wasn't really a big deal, because the players who were playing Tekken weren't casuals and would just learn the hard mechanics and would just stick with the character. But things, they have to evolve. Tekken 7 revived the Tekken franchise and brought a massive number of new faces to the game, and I simply think that Bamco just could not capitalize on this large number of casuals flocking to the game, simply because it was just too hard.
My dick so hard it made the metal detector go off.
A character like Jin, most people would play, but most people would find no success with, because he was just too complicated to use. And when a casual player isn't winning, they find something else to play, which is perfectly understandable. Nobody wants to work a hard 9 to 5 job just to come home, hop on Tekken and get abused online for months before you show any kind of improvement. At that point, you could have just played Fortnite and just had some fun. Having a game where your MC cannot be used by a large majority of your audience is bad. When you look at other fighting games, the MC is usually a basic yet strong all-rounder, key word here being basic. Jin was everything but basic. Jin is a poking oriented character for the most part in Tekken 7. He had a large number of moves that were very good, just in very specific circumstances, and it was left to you as the player to figure these out for yourself. For example, Jin down 4 is a 16 frame quick low poke, except this move was -1 on hit and does 7 damage. Because of the -1, you probably want to be using this move at a good enough range where the -1 isn't too much of a factor, and you only really want to use this as something for some extra chip because it's not good on hit frame wise and it doesn't do a lot of damage. You also can't use this as a primary low poke either because of the damage. One low parry in Tekken 7 gave you a full combo, so getting parried would undo all the damage that you just did to your opponent. Like that. So for a low poke, you would have to look elsewhere. Down back 4 is a move that was +3 on hit and did 18 damage, which seems like a much better move than down 4, right? Well, down back 4 is much slower than down 4 at 20 frames, which means you're probably going to be using this move a lot less, or just risk being beaten out by faster moves period. So there must be something else, right? Well, Jin has a launching hell sweep in this game, but like any other hell sweep, it's launch punishable, not something you just want to be throwing out all the time. Also, the range is significantly worse than down 4 or down back 4. All of these low attacks are very good under the right circumstance. You have to use all of these attacks together and not just one individually, and learning when to recognize when to apply these moves is practically impossible for a new or even intermediate player to figure out on their own. Then there comes the issue that Jin is a Mishima, and if you didn't already know, doing Mishima shit is harder than when I'm having a meal at Hooters. We do not have a Hooters in the UK. The main features of a Mishima character is the electric wind god fist, hell sweep, and of course the wave dash that you use to use these moves. All of these things require high execution to perform. Consecutive wave dashes is a hard input for a new player, an intermediate player, and even a high level player, meaning some of Jin's best moves are basically locked for the majority of people. It's as simple as that. The MC of a game should be able to draw players to your game by doing cool shit. So if all of your MC's cool shit is locked behind execution barriers, bad thing. This is because the figurehead of your game is actually driving people away from your game, and for literally the dumbest reason ever, that you can't even use him. Tekken 8 came and changed this. And before I go any further, I fully support the idea of making a Tekken game more accessible for noobs. The more people who play this game, the better. Simple as. But the way that Harada has gone about this, well, I'm gonna get into it and you'll see. In Tekken 8, they made a number of changes to a number of different characters and mechanics in an attempt to make the game easier. They changed normal backdashing to be better. They gave things to characters that makes them easier to play at a low level, which makes it easier for people to get into the game, right? Well, for Jin they went overboard, to say the very least. A character who, to be fair, had always been known for being an all-round character, really does have everything now, to the point where it's actually ridiculous and harder to point out what he doesn't do. However, somehow, some way, they actually managed to turn Jin into an insanely flawed character at both ends of Tekken's player base, the casuals and the pros. Let's look into it. Firstly, Jin, as I said before, is primarily a poking character. It's kinda his thing, and 214 was his best string. In fact, it was arguably the best string in the game. 10 frame start up and the last hit is optional, so you can 2-1, and because your opponent is expecting the 4, they won't click. So you, as the Jin player, can do whatever the fuck you want. In Tekken 7, if you wanted to challenge the 4, you could, but if you got counter hit, the Jin would have big frame advantage, which is very good, but I wouldn't say broken. In Tekken 8, the 4 is a counter hit knockdown. So they've taken a previously super strong string and just made it completely overtuned. In my opinion, I don't know why this is even a thing. It just gives players more of an incentive to only click this. But this isn't even the cringiest issue here. It seems like Bandai have gone out of their way to create a character that simply punishes your opponent's skill at the game. Jin tracking is broken. It's as simple as that. Jin doesn't really have a need for homing moves to counter steppers a lot of the time. And the 3D element of Tekken is a huge part of Tekken. So when you have a character that just takes that away merely by existing and not doing anything specific, yeah, you're making Jin a much easier character to play, but you've done this by making a character who doesn't play Tekken in Tekken. Like, people were just complaining about how Akuma has 2D abilities in a Tekken game. Nobody had consistent counterplay to jumping attacks because they simply aren't prevalent in Tekken. And now you've got a character who makes the 3D fighting game 2D for the most part. Like, look at this video. Ling, who is the most evasive character in Tekken, it's literally her identity as a character, is doing Ling bullshit and evading. And Jin still manages to clip her. While standing 2 is not a homing move, and it's got almost 90-degree tracking, it looks like. Ridiculous. Honestly, I could go on and on about all the things that Jin got in Tekken 8 and just didn't need to have, but I could pretty much be here all day. Like, Jin has evasion now, Jin has dive kicks that are +2 and do chip damage. 3 plus frames, 3 turn stealing. Like why? What is this character's identity at this point? Like, is your character archetype just like God? Remember when I said that Jin required execution to perform electrics and stuff? No, he doesn't. Jin now has a stance called Breaking Step, where he just gets his wave dash moves for free. He can also enter Breaking Step from his other stance and some other moves. Of course this is inferior to just doing them in neutral, but this isn't really supposed to replace doing that. Jin now just has the threat of +5 for no reason at like almost any given time. And like +5 a lot of times is like a free mix-up, and you got to that point for free basically. Of course this isn't very good at the highest level of play, but it's made him cringe in like every other level of play, which is just bad for the character overall. I do also want to revisit something else that I said in this video. Remember when I was going through all of his lows and explaining how they all have something unique to them? Well, the developers decided, damn, we're going to give you something so that you don't have to think at all, but at the expense of your skill as a Jin player. Jin's down back 4. Remember how I said it was +3 on hit, good range? And remember how I said that this used to be a knockdown on counter hit? Gone. So the thing that made this low usable is now gone. And do you know what they gave players to compensate for this? Down 2. You heard me correctly, Jin has a down 2. And it is a counter hit launcher because Jin needed that, right? And it high crushes for some godforsaken reason. Now I do want to say, this move is 22 frames. So with a good amount of labbing, it's very reactable. So for anyone above, I'd say blue ranks, not too much of an issue, but for anyone below that, Jin now has a damaging low that tracks well and counter hit launches. You don't need the execution of a hell sweep as your mix up low because you can just down 2. And sometimes it will just launch because it high crushes and is a counter hit launcher. So what I'm seeing is overall you've nerfed Jin's lows, because at the very pinnacle of Tekken play, down back 4 is a reactable low, fairly consistently. So you have to skillfully place it where it's harder for your opponent to react to. And in Tekken 7, the low's reward was somewhat worth the risk of being punished, because it knocked down on counter hit and gave advantage on normal hit. But now you're just risking a 13 frame punish for 18 damage basically. Like, you created a character that's not really going to pop off in tournament, and a character that a large amount of the player base is going to despise because they have to go against brain dead strats. So Jin pretty much doesn't have any real low pokes anymore. And at low and intermediate levels of play, Jin is just cringe because players can't react to down 2. Every decision that the devs have made to do with this character has just been so cringe. They had the right idea making Jin an easier character to play, but not like this. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. And until next time.